but people who just listen. If you ever want to support someone who's gotten a life-changing diagnosis, just to listen to them, not offer advice, just be there. And again, validate their feelings, even if what they're saying, obviously, sometimes you have to say, hey, maybe you should talk to a professional or whatever, but like their feelings are valid. They're going through something completely life-changing, and just to listen and support them and not judge them, not try to relate to it. Again, unless you are another parent of a child with that exact diagnosis, you just be supportive, but be quiet.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Well, howdy, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. It's another great episode. So the thing that I love about this season is the what I wish I knew is that I never have to worry that when I ask the question of, what do you wish that you would have known, that someone has to sit there and think, oh man, what do I wish? In fact, I think if there's ever a pause, it's how do I whittle down the list of all the things that I want to share, of all the things that I wish I would have known. And my guest today, so Kelly and I met, oh man, a million years ago. We first met online. There was this whole group. I mean, I think most of you, if you were a mom in the early 2000s or the mid 2010s, blogs were like a thing that you would go online and you would read people's experiences, and there was a lot of conversation in the com boxes. And then those people became trusted confidants because you knew about their life and you had conversed in the com box. And then when you met them in real life, it was like you just picked up like you were old friends. And so Kelly has long been a mom that I admired because she found a way to find joy in her circumstance. And I think when you're a special needs mom or the mom of a child who has a lot of medical conditions or a lot of medical challenges, that it's a choice, and you have to, at some point along the way, you choose the life that you have. And Kelly is such a great example of choosing the life that she has. She'll admit in the interview that she's irritable and things were hard and she wasn't happy at some points, like all of us, because we're all human. But Kelly chose the life that she had, and she's found a way to find joy and realism. She has an amazing book. And so there's so much that I wanted to ask her. And I mean, as it turns out, I have this podcast, and I was like, well, I guess I'll just put her on the podcast and we'll talk about it, which is exactly what I did. So I hope that you enjoy today's interview as we talk about what it's like and what she wishes that she would have known as a mom of special needs children. Kelly Mantoan is a wife and a mother to 5 children, 2 of whom have spinal muscular atrophy. It's a degenerative neuromuscular disorder. She's also the author of Better Than Okay, Finding Joy as a Special Needs Parent, and she's the founder of Accepting the Gift, a ministry for Catholic special needs parents. And she also writes about family life, homeschooling, and special needs parenting at her blog, This Ain't the Lyceum. It's so great. So without any further ado, let's get to a really great conversation. Well, it's always fun when I get to visit with someone that I know like in real life. So Kelly, thanks for being here.
It's so great to be here and talk with you, Kathryn.
Well, you have this amazing life experience that I think you've been talking about it for as long as I have been following along. And you've always been vulnerable and honest, but also funny. And those are all the things that I love about you. So I think because I know you and love you, not everyone listening does. So maybe just tell us a little bit about you and your family, and particularly your boys.
Sure. So my name's Kelly. I've been married for about 24 years now. I have 5 kids with my wonderful husband. We live in New Jersey. And, my youngest 2 have a degenerative neuromuscular disease known as spinal muscular atrophy. And it was kind of a shock to us. We had these 3 typically developing kids. And then when our 4th was just about ready to turn 1, we got the diagnosis. And then when our youngest was born, he was in the NICU, and we got the diagnosis in the NICU for him. So our life was kind of radically changed from like being, parents of like typical kids to all of a sudden becoming a special needs family. I started blogging way back when mommy blogs were like really popular.
When those
And
were a thing.
yeah, they were like this big thing. And I just started writing about our life and sharing about our family. And, we kind of had a different family than a lot of people out there. I didn't want to be known as a special needs mom blogger, but people started reaching out to me. I was kind of writing funny things and happy things. And people are like, I don't know any other special needs families at my parish and my community. You're the only person I know. And they were like pouring their hearts out to me with all these concerns and everything. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I'm just this mommy blogger. But I wound up writing the same things over and over to people, same kind of advice. So ultimately, I wrote a book called Better Than Okay, Finding Joy as a Special Needs Parent, because that's really what so many parents were looking for, is they were trying to get over the initial stages of the diagnosis and get back to some sort of normal life. And they were having a hard time with it. And I seemed to, not have it all together, but I wasn't like struggling or suffering that they could tell. And they wanted to know, how did they get to that point? And then I realized that the book really wasn't enough. So I started a ministry then as well. Just kind of specifically, we help Catholic special needs parents, and really, we help parents really learn to advocate for their kids at parishes, but then also just give them the support that they need if you feel, isolated and cut off from other special needs parents as well. So yeah, even though I didn't set out for this really to become my thing, it has become my thing. And I find I really do have a passion speaking about it now. So, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
I think most NICU parents would be like, well, this wasn't on my bingo card, and this wasn't the way I thought my life was going to go, but yet here we are, and you find joy in whatever circumstance that you're given. I want to go back for a second. Okay, so for people that don't know what your boys, the diagnosis that they have, and I want to make sure that I say it right. So they have spinal muscular atrophy. Maybe explain to people what that is and what that looks like clinically in your boys.
So spinal muscular atrophy, it's genetic. So it's diagnosed through like gene testing. And now in all 50 states, it is done as part of the newborn screen. It was not when my sons were diagnosed. So now it's standard testing, newborn screen. And basically, there's different types of it, ranging from the most severe to not as severe. And my boys are kind of on the more severe end. But basically, it's all over muscle weakness, starting with the largest muscle groups down to the smallest muscle groups, and it worsens over time. So my sons use power wheelchairs for mobility, and they need help doing everything with, getting dressed, moving around. They can still move like their hands, and they can do some small fine motor type things. Cognitively, they are typical teenagers. They're 17 and 14, and they love all the same things that regular 14 and 17-year-old boys like. So, video games and, all sorts of crazy teen boy stuff and like weird memes, like all that
Right.
stuff. So, and again, academically, the same as kids that age. So it does not in any way impact intellectual or cognitive. It's strictly a physical disability. So yeah, so we're basically, my husband and I do a lot of caregiving and things like that for them.
So you mentioned that your first son, who is Teddy, right? Did I get that right? Fulton.
Fulton is
Okay, I
17
knew I was
and
gonna
Teddy
mess
is
it up.
14. Yeah.
I was looking at their names, I was like, "No, Fulton's
Yeah.
the oldest." So you said he was a year old before you got the diagnosis, but then your
Mhm.
younger son or your baby that you found out in the NICU, so was it because you knew what to look for or had testing had changed? Give us an idea of why the different diagnosis times.
So Fulton, he was having a lot of delays and we didn't know why. And I took him to the pediatrician at one point and I met with a nurse practitioner there, and she basically at the time blamed me for his delays, saying, you have all these kids, you're overwhelmed, you're not spending enough time with him, that's why he has delays. And it pushed off the diagnosis process probably by several months. And then finally, his delays were becoming so great. We saw another doctor, and this doctor was like, no, this is not your fault. He has no reflexes. And I'm like, how did we get to the point? Like, how did we get to 8 months? And just now we're realizing he has no reflexes. And so then all visits, we had the genetic testing done. Originally, they said to rule it out, which then they called me and said, oh, we were wrong. He actually has this disease. So at that point, then we knew it was genetic. And we learned that actually, with each of my pregnancies, we had a 25% chance of each child, like there's a 25% chance of having a child with SMA. So we had 3 children that were not affected. We had our fourth was, and then surprise, pregnancy number 5, we knew to look for it. So when he was in the NICU, we had him tested and they said he does have it. So that was kind of a surprise for us because we thought, what's the likelihood we would have 2 in a row with the diagnosis? But
with a 25% chance.
yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole season, which I love this theme so much. I told you before we started recording, I've been holding on to this one for a while of the things that I
Mhm.
wish I knew. What do you wish you knew with about that diagnosis that you know now? Like if someone and maybe they're grappling with the same diagnosis or maybe it's something completely different, but I think special needs moms may feel you on this one. What do you wish somebody had told you? What do you wish you knew all those years ago?
Man, there's so much that when I think back to the very early days following the diagnosis of each of my sons, really it was just, I wish I would have known how I was feeling was perfectly normal and valid, and it was fine. Like my emotions were all over the place, and people would always say things to me to try to relate or make me feel better or whatever. And I would get so angry or so upset. I was just all over the place. And that's perfectly normal. Like to have and to go through like a grieving process, like that's perfectly normal when you're dealing with such a severe diagnosis for your child. And I didn't realize that. I thought I was crazy. And so that's a big thing about what I talk to other parents now is however you're feeling, it's perfectly normal. Like you've been handed this major life change and everything, quite possibly a lot of things you've envisioned for your child are going to change. And it's perfectly normal to be sad, be angry, be in denial, but all the things you hear about the grieving process, it's all normal. So that's probably the number one thing I wish I would have known at the time. Right behind that, though, is I wish I didn't take all the negative statistics right away at face value. Because when you get a diagnosis, like I was told at the time, most kids with SMA, most severe type, they die by the age of 3. And that was one of the first things told to me. And now, thankfully, there's some wonderful drug treatments that are amazing. It's not the death sentence it once was. But that was one of the first things handed to me. So, and it was all those sorts of statistics. Your child will never walk. Your child will never do this. Never do, never do, never do. And I wish I just would have right away talked to other parents whose children had the diagnosis and young adults that also had the diagnosis. I really put that off. I didn't want to talk to parents because I thought I'd be hearing more bad things, more negative things.
Right.
And really, they would have told me all the good things that come with raising a child with SMA or with physical disabilities. I would have loved to have met with, teenagers and young adults who were living with SMA and doing all the things that, maybe they weren't doing some of the things like playing professional football, but they're still going to football games and enjoying life and things like that. So I wish I would have talked to people a lot sooner than I did. So those were probably the 2 big things right away early on that I wish I would have known.
You said something just now that got me thinking that we don't talk to people that maybe have an experience that we've had or a diagnosis because we're afraid
Yes.
that they're just going to confirm our worst fears. And
Hmm.
instead, and I keep finding this with almost every guest that I have, and certainly with our experience, the more that I know, the more I find the better than okay, the joy part. But
Yes.
I'm terrified to ask because I don't want someone to confirm my worst fear.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I think it was hard for me early on because so many of the people that were referred to me, they had children who had passed away. So I was like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. But again, these people had their children lived for years with this diagnosis and they had wonderful lives, wonderful experiences. And now I know I've met people whose children have passed and they will still tell me, oh, my child did this and we did this and we had a wonderful, it's still that child was a gift and a blessing and a joy. And just because they had the diagnosis of spinal muscular atrophy, it didn't mean that the parent loved them any less, that the child loved life any less. So yeah, I mean, that's big thing. I really wish I would have talked to people sooner. And again, it's something that I always encourage parents who reach out to me. I figure, well, if they're reaching out to me with questions,
Yeah.
they know they want that connection. So it's like just encouraging people even more to really keep talking and connecting.
So, what's the relationship like with your three older children who are normal, typically developing kids with their
Mhm.
two brothers? I'm curious how real is the sibling rivalry? Because I know what big families kind of don't
Yeah.
give you a lot of latitude. They're like, whatever, they don't really care. But I'm curious what that interaction was like and maybe how having brothers that have SMA, like how that's changed them.
I think the thing is, my oldest daughter was 5, just turned 5 when Fulton was diagnosed, and then just turned 8 when Teddy was diagnosed. So all my kids were very young.
Young.
5 kids, 8 years. They were all very young. And so for them, going out with wheelchairs, evaluating every single place we ever wanted to travel to for accessibility, stairs, medical equipment, all this stuff, having to adapt their play, move things to the floor more so the boys could kind of lay there and play with them, or modify things a different way. That's my kids' normal. And I think that ties into something else I feel like I wish I knew. You settle into a different normal. So it's not the normal that you envision when you have however many kids or you're having, whatever, but like you do settle into a normal. So I think my older 3 kids still have a normal relationship with Fulton and Teddy, even though Fulton and Teddy are physically disabled. A lot of
Right.
people are like, oh, well, are they more caring and more loving and more helpful? It's like, well, they help out just the way I would expect any kids, you want them to help out in your family and do things and assist. And if somebody needs something, you help them. So my kids are helpful. I mean, I don't know if they're any more loving and compassionate because I
Right.
mean, Fulton and Teddy make it difficult. They're just as sassy and have just as much attitude as I said, typical teenagers. And there's all that rivalry and bickering and arguing, and there's no less of that. So it's still a normal sibling relationship. It's just the normal for our family, which is probably different than what some people have, but it's
Right.
normal for us.
Well, you were talking about your blog and how you infused just realism, but also humor. I mean, did the humor come naturally? I think some people, Kelly, may have a struggle with how do I find joy in this place? Because it feels
Mhm.
really hard, whatever that hard place may be. And so maybe they're thinking like I have to manufacture joy, but for you, it seems to come naturally. I'm curious why that is and sort of how that's colored your experience.
Well, I think when I started the blog, part of it was I needed a positive outlook. I was still pretty down about the diagnosis of my sons at that point, and their care was still very overwhelming to me. And I was like, I need something that makes me happy. And I wanted it to be funny. I wanted to share funny stuff because I have always been sort of a funny person. I like to make people laugh, and I felt like I kind of lost a little bit of that. So I wanted to kind of get back into that. And I've always been a writer. So I started looking for the funny things that were happening during the day and the things I could be grateful for. And then that's what I focused on writing. And so when you spend all your time looking for the funny things, the joyful things, you see them more and it's easier to focus on
Mhm.
them than on the hard things. There was still a lot of hard and difficult things going on while I was writing all these ridiculous, some of them, blog posts. But because I was so, I wanted to find the good things, I became a happier person because I was looking for the happy, joyful things. I was finding them. If all you do is focus on the sad, negative things, then you're going to be a more sad and negative person. So it really is, it's a choice. You really do have to kind of force yourself to want to be that, be grateful, find the good things to be thankful for, and, find the funny things. I mean, all kids say and do silly things, and whether they do it running around the house or driving around the house in a wheelchair, you can still, it's still funny and you can still write about it and find the joy in it and stuff.
I didn't think about that. You do have drivers in your house, just in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's fine. I mean, I will say never go up to a person, a child in a wheelchair, and be like, "Hey, you're driving really great there. Slow down, buddy." They hate that. They absolutely
Love that.
hate that. So, but yeah, I mean, it's as natural to them as walking is for anybody
Sure.
else. So if you wouldn't go up to someone and say, "Hey, you're walking like a pro," don't go up to, my sons or someone in a wheelchair and be like, "Hey, you're driving really well." But yeah, it's second
Well,
nature.
and speaking of things that people say that you're like, "Ah, I really wish people didn't say that." Okay, so we have that one. What are some other things, Kelly, that and I think it comes from a well-meaning place or
Yeah.
they have a desire to, like, see your family, but they just you're like, "Maybe that was insensitive," or maybe that like you said, "You would never have said that to someone else. Why would you say that to us?" What's been hurtful and what's been helpful when people say? This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you.
I will say the hardest thing for me as the mom and my sons is for whatever reason, people assume that because my sons are in wheelchairs, they are also intellectually disabled. And they will talk to them like they're children, little children, and they're 14 and 17. And, they are young men. And, we talk to them like they're young men, but some people, they still come up and talk to them like they're children, little kids. And so that kind of gets all us a little fired up. But again, people are just trying to be nice. People also always want to touch them like they're a small child and pat them on the head. And it's like, if you wouldn't go up to any other 17-year-old and pat them on the head or
You
grab their
definitely would not do
hand,
that. Yeah.
do not do that, just because the person's in a wheelchair. So those would be the big ones. Those would be the big ones. Yeah.
And what have people done or said, Kelly, that particularly I'm thinking about the early days, like in the days that you were like maybe feeling overwhelmed, or like you said, the diagnosis was a lot physically demanding. You had 5 kids. I'm with you. I had 5 kids under the age of 8. It's a lot. What were some things that people did or said then and then now that if you're like, man, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for recognizing this stage of my life.
What people did that was good and didn't upset me, I think it would just be listening and not trying to relate what I was going through. People would often want to relate. I had someone try to relate their child's peanut allergy to my son's diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that would be hard,
Right.
because again, they mean well. But to me, I, you know, I, I couldn't wrap my head around it. But people who just listen, if you ever want to support someone who's gotten a life-changing diagnosis, just to listen to them, not offer advice, just be there. And again, validate their feelings, even if what they're saying, obviously, sometimes you have to say, hey, maybe you should talk to a professional or whatever, but like their feelings are valid. They're going through something completely life-changing, and just to listen and support them and not judge them, not try to relate to it. Again, unless you are another parent of a child with that exact diagnosis,
Right.
you just be supportive, but be quiet. I think that was huge. The friends that I could just go to and really pour my heart out, that was such a big help for me, in the early days.
That's been a theme this season. Usually when I ask moms that,
Mhm.
this gift of presence, I think is
Mhm.
often understated, but it's such an important thing that we can do for people is just to sit with them, learn from them, be present to
Mhm.
them, love them well. I mean, I think we
Yes.
sometimes discount. how much love really does show up, and you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything,
Yeah.
just to be present. I love that. So, myths or things that people think about your family that you're like, "That is untrue. That is inaccurate. That is not what our family is like."
Well, people think that my husband and I are saints or superheroes because we are caring for two, we have 5 kids, which is a lot. Now our older 3 are basically self-sufficient. But because we're caring for 2 kids with physical disabilities, people always say, "Oh, I could never do what you do," as if like, I chose this. Like, yeah, this is,
That
I'm
that you went
prepared
to
for
the
this.
hospital and you're like, "I'll
Yeah,
take
like
that." Yeah.
I'm signing up for this. No, like people say, "I could never do what you do. You're so amazing. You're so incredible." It's like, no, no, like please just go talk to my sons and they'll tell you how angry and irritable I am and how imperfect I am, how I still forget to order medical supplies at the right time or do insurance things the way I'm supposed to. We're not perfect people. We're just doing the best we can day by day with, the life that we have. And, I guess maybe because we're not miserable, I guess a lot of people assume like, oh, well, if you have disabled kids, maybe you're going to be a miserable cuss. But we're not, like we're just a regular, happy, normal family in our eyes. So, but we're not, you don't need to have any sort of like superhero powers to also, parent a child with disabilities and be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said that at the beginning too, that it's okay to sit with something that's hard, to be like, "This is not what I thought. This was not on the bingo card. This is
Yeah.
not what I thought." And give yourself permission to grieve maybe the life that you thought you were gonna have, and then you
Mhm.
take the time to be like, "Okay, now it's time to we either stay in this sad, horrible place or we learn and we
Mhm.
find a way to move forward." I think that that's a mantra that you've talked about a lot. This joyful part, but also this acceptance part.
Mhm.
So, if you could go back, Kelly, and give like a NICU mom or a mom who just got a hard diagnosis some wisdom, like something that you learned that you're like, yeah, that was a game changer. When that person said that, or when that doctor did this, that was a turning point. Did you have a moment like that?
Well, I think I had a friend at the time who said to me her son did not have SMA, but he was physically disabled. And she said to me, and I said to her, "I don't think I'll ever laugh or smile again." And she's like, "You will, you will." And I couldn't imagine it at the time, even though I could see her living a joyful life,
Right.
but it was true. You know, the sadness that you feel, that pain, you're not going to carry that with you 24/7 for the rest of your life. And I think at that time, it feels like you will. It feels like you'll never be free of it, but it doesn't sit there. And as you see your child living a wonderful life with whatever disability he or she may have, your own pain lifts as well. And you feel the joy as you see I thought my child would be suffering 24/7 based on what they were telling me. You know what I mean? You get the
Right.
negative statistics and you think, oh, it's going to be a life of 24/7 misery for them. So it'll be a life of 24/7 misery for you, but it's not. Even if things are difficult for your child and they can't do everything, they still are living, for the most part, probably a really good and joyful life. And so you can too. And so that advice that I would smile again, it was hard for me to hear at the time, but it was absolutely true. And that's what I think parents early on need to know, that heaviness, it's not going to be with them forever.
Yeah, the hard part doesn't you
Mhm.
don't stay there forever. I think that's good. Yeah, I do think about some dark days and I remember
Mhm.
thinking, this is never gonna get easier. And then
Yeah.
someone would pop in my life and be like, "It is," and I was like, "And now I need to punch you in the face." But they
Yeah.
were right, and I think you can only hear that from someone else who's been in the hard place before,
Yes.
because otherwise you will punch them in the face. But I was like, "Well,
Yes.
they do have the receipts. They have lived through the hard
Yes.
thing. I think I need to listen." Okay, so you talked about being a writer. You are a gifted writer, by the way. So what made you feel called? I know that you were sharing it on your blog, which feels so 1990s. I love my blog. I remember going back and reading some old posts, but then you decided to turn that into a book. Like what was the prompting, and like what's the big takeaway, Kelly? If someone gets your book Better Than Okay, what do you hope they take from that?
It's basically everything I wish I would have had when my sons were diagnosed. It's kind of all the lessons I learned. Like people look at me now and they think, oh, like you're happy and you're joyful. But like it was a process. It was a long process. And I really had to figure out a lot of it on my own. I did have some people that I talked to and they helped me but it was a long process. I give talks now to other parents and they'll say, oh, well, I'm still feeling this way. I'm still feeling this way. And I'll be like, well, how long has it been since your child's diagnosis? And they'll be like, well, it's been almost 2 years. And I'll say, well, I mean, it took me at least 5 years till I was feeling like my life was like somewhat back to how it was before my son's diagnosis. You know what I mean? And by the time I wrote the book, it was even a few more years. So it's a process. And so the book is just everything that I learned going through that process, that what I wish I knew, and just how we grew through all these experiences and the lessons that we learned. I can't speak for my husband, but a lot of the things that we learned together and how it affected our marriage and strengthened our marriage. And, again, talking about my older kids and how it affected how we parent them, their relationship with their siblings. So it's just everything I wish I knew. And it was everything that I said as I was getting emails from other people who had read the blog and they wanted advice on things. It was just the same things that I was sharing. It's like, now I can just say when people email me, go read my book. Here,
That's
read the
chapter
book. It's all in
four.
the book.
Yeah.
It's all in the book. It's all in the book. And nothing, I mean, nothing touches. I mean, it's not some huge bestseller, small publishing house, but I mean, I still get emails from people who buy it and read it and they're like, this helps so much. And that, like, then it's worth it. Like, I'm sharing my story and it's helping a parent who maybe didn't know who else to talk to, did feel kind of alone or isolated. And thankfully now we have the internet and it's easy to connect with parents of kids who have all sorts of diagnoses. It's a lot easier, but you know, you can still feel very isolated if you don't want to be online all the time. So if the book helps people, that's great. I'm glad I put it all out there.
No, I'm glad you did too. I was joking with a friend the other day. I said, "Man, hashtags did not exist when I started having my babies, and now they do." And then the click of a button I can find, I remember thinking, I'm never going to find another mom that feels XYZ, or I'm never going to find another mom that's been through this. And now you pick up your phone, you type in the hashtag, or you Google the search, and all of a sudden you find there's a Facebook group, there's an Instagram account, there's a book out there, like all the things that did not exist when we were going through some of that stuff. So I like to say that we're the reason that those things exist because we were the ones that wrote them and started the
Yeah.
accounts and all that. But if you had to go back, so this is a question that I've been asking all my guests at the very end of our interviews because I love the what I wish I knew. So, what do you wish you would have known about becoming a special needs parent, Kelly?
Well, I think it's not to worry about the future. I think another thing is when you get a diagnosis, you start thinking big picture because now it's completely changed from what you expected. And so the future is this big, scary, unknown place. And you sort of are tempted to feel the weight of that on you all at once. But you can't worry about the future. You have to plan, obviously, like, plan and be prudent and stuff, but you can't worry about the future and let this unknown really overshadow the present and the present joy that your child feels. When my sons were diagnosed, like I said, there was no drug treatments. There was nothing. It was a death sentence for a lot of kids that were severely affected. And now there's 3 drugs, not even one, there's 3 drugs. And my son's prognosis has radically changed from when they were diagnosed. So, I went from, when Fulton was diagnosed thinking, will he make his first Holy Communion? Will he make his sacrament of confirmation? To now Teddy's been confirmed and Fulton's a senior in high school and, thinking long-term big picture goals. So you can't take the weight of that uncertainty when you're handed this child with a diagnosis and think the worst about everything. You got to really just take it day by day and see the joy in every day and enjoy each day to the most and plan for the future, but not let it overshadow everything because you don't know.
Well, the last time I checked, none of us, even if we did try to live in the future, all the things that I either imagined would happen or
Mhm.
thought could happen, none of those things have happened. And not because they were terrible things that I was envisioning, but even some of the things that I thought would be joy filled are even more joyful than I imagined in the future
Mhm.
because I was like, but I forgot to factor in this and that. So that's good advice.
And I would say also some of the things I was so afraid of, some rough things have happened. Some scary things have happened, but like, you know what? I got through it. Like we got through it because I have so much experience now. And when we go to the hospital and we do things, I don't want to say I'm an old pro, but the things that I was so scared of, there's still some scary things, but we got through them and I'm stronger. And so even the things that you're afraid of aren't necessarily the things to be afraid of, or you're stronger than you think. You're going to get
Yeah.
through a lot of things.
That's a good way to end it. You are stronger than you think. Kelly, thank you for the gift of your wisdom because it's all out there. I'll make sure that we share it all in the show notes, but thanks for the gift of your vulnerability today. It's been awesome. In today's 2-minute take, I have a lot to reflect upon. I really enjoyed my conversation with Kelly. I've long enjoyed reading her writing. She is delightfully funny and so honest. And that certainly was the case in the interview today. I think what I really want to touch on is something that she said there at the end is that, don't live in the future. And also we make assumptions about families just based on one or two experiences that we've had, maybe with a family that looks like theirs or seems like they might be like theirs. And I think that the take home message here is this is that every family is unique. Every family deals with obstacles differently. They celebrate joys differently. And I think in Kelly's interview and really kind of throughout our whole conversation is I just kept thinking about, man, they've really chosen to lean in to their particular family, their particular circumstance. And there's a lot of joy there. I hate to admit this, but I think a long time ago, probably long before we had our NICU baby, so this is Kathryn from 20 years ago, I looked at families who had children who were differently abled or who had challenges, and I pitied them. I thought, man, they must have a miserable existence. They must not be joyful. I feel so sad for them. And I look back now and I'm embarrassed that those are the thoughts that I had about those families because every family that that I have had the gift of having a conversation with here on the podcast or knowing in real life is so vastly different from that they had a reckoning. Like as Kelly said, she didn't go to the hospital and she's like, I'll take behind what's door number one and I'll choose this really hard thing. Like, no, none of us get to choose that, but we do get to choose how we react to it. And maybe the initial reaction is, this is terrible. I hate this. This is not what I signed up for. But there's a reckoning where you're like, okay, this is our life. I'm going to lean into it and we are going to have an amazing life. And I don't think that I allowed the Kathryn of 20 years ago to believe that families that looked different than ours might be incredibly joyful and they might really love their life. And as I listened to Kelly in that conversation, I've read bits and pieces of her book. She loves her life. And my encouragement to you, if you're listening to this and you're a mom or a dad or a caregiver of a special needs child, I hope that Kelly gave you some encouragement to really love your life. There's a lot to love there. So, man, that was good. I love chatting with her. If you've loved today's episode, please share it with a friend. Give us a rating over on all the places where you listen or even where you watch. You can find us over on YouTube. It's always a gift whenever you do that, especially when you share it with someone that you know. And I hope this particular episode, certainly if you know a family who has a special needs child, I hope this is the episode that you send to them. We have so much more this season. Don't go anywhere because a little bit about what you're going to hear next time is coming up.
Well, sometimes birth is just traumatic. And it's like, no, birth doesn't have to be traumatic. Sometimes birth goes in a direction that we weren't expecting. But we, as caregivers, as professionals, as medical professionals, as birth attendants, we have a ton of control on how that person, that patient, that mom experiences that and what we can do to protect them from inflicting trauma on them. And I think that's really, really, really important when we're talking about birth trauma.